So the next topic that we're talking about, finally, the last one, is St. Louis in the Civil War, and some of the things that we'll be doing on Monday, March 6th for a field trip, our field school experience. So there was a whole bunch of people, kind of like I mentioned in the first video. St. Louis was a mix of people that owned slaves, that were anti-slavery, there were free African Americans, there were enslaved people and German immigrants who were very anti-slavery. So there were all sorts of mixed up groups of people in our city. So I talked about the fact that in Camp Jackson, German volunteers marched on the Confederate training camp and took the weapons. St. Louisans supported the Confederate training camp and started the riot with the German volunteers. So in Missouri, it was a border state. So many citizens owned slaves that they weren't ready to leave the Union. And two governors ended up claiming governance in Missouri, one in Texas. They claimed we were part of the Confederacy, and the other one in Jeff City that we were part of the Union. So as we were officially part of the Union, but there was this other government. There were people fighting for the Confederacy. They joined the Confederate Army. So there were Missouri bushwhackers also roaming around the state and terrorizing pro-Union people, especially on the western border. And Kansas Jayhawkers and others tried to retaliate. So Ulysses S. Grant, for example, his wife's family owned Whitehaven, which is now known as Grant's Farm, where a lot of enslaved people were enslaved. So the Dents were pro-Confederacy, and they held their slaves on there, and their slaves started to leave because they could join up the whole thing, and they could join the Union Army, but it didn't mean that the Dents were necessarily pro-Union. When we go to the Hanley house, so the Hanley family was a blacksmith who built Hanley Road and the Hanley house, and he owned slaves. They were Confederate sympathizers, and why they were Confederate sympathizers is because he came from Virginia. Okay, so he originated in Virginia in the early 1800s, and so he took this wilderness road and came through what was known as the Cumberland Gap, and ended up, settling, like you see it says right here, they went to Virginia and he settled in St. Louis. They did it because they totally ruined their field in Virginia. And so, George Washington is on their mantelpiece because that was their hero, Mr. George Washington, who lived in Virginia. So it was an idyllic time, and there are kind of three other people that are important: Cyrene Hanley, Elizabeth Walton, and F.B. Walton. So this is the road that Hanley built. It was called the Central Plank Road. Oh, this is where his farm was, his shop was. So this is the Central Plank Road, which is actually also known as Olive. And so he had his blacksmith shop. So he needed to get from this road, his blacksmith shop, to Clayton. So he built the Hanley Road to get from the Central Plank Road, Olive, to Clayton. This census shows, and this is a bigger picture, but that there is Ralph Clayton, sorry, not Roger, but he was a farmer. And we can barely also see Thomas Skinker. He was a lawyer. And they all had John McKnight and Ralph Clayton and Thomas Skinker. They all were from Virginia. So here are some of our people. There's Robert Forsyth, Ralph Clayton, that's Martin Hanley, and Benjamin Thomas, and Rebecca McCutcheon, who owns what is now Oaknell Park. All right, so if you looked at the townships, it was St. Ferdinand, which becomes Florissant. The Central, which is St. Louis City and Clayton area. Carondelet, which is South City till this day. Bonham, which is a little bit more like the West County area, and then Merrimack. Okay, so if you blow it up, this was so this is Skinker Road. So we this black line is where the city-county line was. The reason that the city-county line wasn't on Skinker Road was because Robert Skinker wouldn't give, or Thomas Skinker, he wouldn't give his land to become Forest Park. So the city and the county the city was really upset. So they drove a line right through his house. So his house was sitting right here. So he'd wake up one day on the city line, and on the other side, or this is the city line, this was his house right on this line. So this was his original property of land, and then Thomas Skinker, you see, also owned all this. This is Forsyth's land, so our school is like right in here, because here is Hanley Road. Big Ben wasn't built yet, but this was Hanley's Road. And then further up is going to be the Hanley Farm. So, yep, right here. So this is where Westmoreland and Maryland School is, all in this area. So, yeah, we are here, right here on Thomas Skinker's land. You can see Damon. Okay, Shoto. Here's Clayton Road. Ralph Clayton obviously owned the biggest amount of land, which is why our town is named for Clayton and not for Hanley. And the McCutcheon Farm, this looks like it's probably Gay Avenue, the guy who gets he gets a street named after him as well. And all these people in here we know owned enslaved people. So there, we'll now show the borders. Okay, so here we go. So here's Whiteown Terrace. So we were on Thomas Skinker's land. And we just kind of look at where everything is. So McCutcheon Farm was over here. She definitely was doing some illegal activity. Clayton's Farm. Hanley's Farm. Forsyth. McKnight. All right, so again, remember that in 1820, Missouri was admitted as a slave state. So our real reality is that Missouri slavery was legal. What we know a slave schedule is more like a register. That we know Martin Hanley owned 1 to 4 and enslaved 1 to 4 people. Ralph Clayton owned 1. Rebecca McCutcheon owned at least 5. John McKnight owned 3. William McKnight owned 7. And Forsyth owned 12. And Skinker owned 24. So Ralph Clayton definitely owned the lease for a large chunk of land. So again, Mount Olive was, here's a plank road, and this was his way of own his land. So we know a lot about the Hanley family, and we will be kind of getting to see a much more, like, not as much about the blacksmith shop, but just a little bit more about the Hanley family and their life, and then the life of their enslaved person, Lydia. So again, just kind of getting to know who these people are. This is the house that we're going to go see on our trip. And then the summer kitchen where their enslaved person slept is in the back of the house. Okay. So again, just going back to what we're going to be doing. So again, we're going to be really emphasizing the fact that their Hanley family were Confederate sympathizers. They were secretly writing letters and transferring letters to Confederate prisoners in Gratiot Street Prison. So another part of their illegal activity. They also made uniforms for the Confederacy. So lots of not so great things going on. The daughters played Confederate songs as a way to be rebellious. So when we go to Jefferson Barracks, it was founded in 1826 as a military training facility for soldiers fighting to gain land in the West. The generals who served there were Ulysses S. Grant, William Sherman, Confederate generals Robert E. Lee, James Longstreet, Albert Sidney Johnston, American President Zachary Taylor, and Confederate President Jefferson Davis. So it became a military hospital, and we'll be seeing some of these different tools when we go there in real life. Steamboats outfitted as floating hospitals also supplemented bed space as well as providing transportation. And it was sometimes that it treated more soldiers than any other in the nation. So again, other St. Louisans, they gathered supplies, they hosted a fair, or it was basically like a giant collection. Yeats built ironclads for the Union, and Ladue and others supported the Union. And so again, we're not going to really get into these now, but just so you kind of know that there's a lot of conflicting forces, and just have that background when we go there.